Hey friends, Detective Brooks here. Tayli Palmer, a 12-year-old girl, had her whole life ahead of her, but unfortunately, she met a terrible fate. Being an ordinary teenager, she became a victim of inhuman violence. Tayli's mother, sensing a serious threat to her daughter's life from her tyrant husband, placed her under the care of the Child Protection Center. The woman hoped this decision would keep the girl out of danger and give her a chance for a better future. However, as it later turned out, the mother's good intentions only worsened the situation for young Tia, as Tayli was affectionately called by her loved ones, and soon a horrific tragedy occurred. Under pressure from her tyrant husband, Cindy, Tayli's birth mother, was forced to hand her daughter over to the Child Protection System. She sincerely believed she was doing the right thing, as circumstances required saving the child. The woman, herself a victim of domestic violence, sought to protect her daughter from a similar fate. Due to the lack of opportunity to properly raise the girl in strained family relationships, Tayli grew up to be a troubled child. She often ran away from home to avoid conflicts between her parents and had a propensity for vagrancy. In January 2015, by decision of the Child Protection Center, 12-year-old Tayli was sent to a wonderful family living in the town of Chambers Flat, about a 40-minute drive from Brisbane, Australia. It was a quiet and cozy town with a population of around 500 people. The Thornburns became the foster family for the girl, a household consisting of the head of the family, Rick, his wife Julie, and their two sons. The elder John, 19 years old, and the younger Trent, 18 years old. By that time, Tayli had already managed to change several foster families. For one reason or another, new families did not suit her due to the girl's difficult character. Some considered Tayli quite a conflicted personality. The Thornburn family was no exception. Young Tayli was dissatisfied with the prospect of living with two teenage boys much older than her. However, she had no choice. Tayli's new foster parents, Rick and Julie, had been married for over 25 years at the time. Rick, a former truck driver, had to switch to lighter vehicles due to a serious back injury. This led him to start his own business selling fast food from a van, and he also owned a horse farm. Julie, his wife, opened a home daycare. Throughout the district, the Thornburn family had a reputation as a decent, respected, and exemplary family, so the Child Protection Services chose them as a foster family for Tayli. For 4 months, it seemed that the girl had settled well into her new family and continued to live there until the tragic events that followed. Tayli attended Morrison State High School, located just a 20-minute drive from the Thornburn home. Outwardly, life seemed to be getting better. Everyone got used to Tayli, and she seemed to get along with her new household members. But as it turned out, not everything was as cloudless as it might have seemed at first glance. The morning of October 30, 2015, seemed ordinary for the Thornburn family. Rick, as usual, drove his foster daughter Tayli to school and returned home to repair his car. But just a few hours later, a disturbing call came from the school. Tayli had not shown up for classes. For the girl, this was not the first time she had run away. With a difficult childhood behind her, she was used to escaping her problems in this way. However, this time, unlike previous instances when Tayli would quickly return on her own or be found, the girl vanished without a trace. In desperation, Rick posted on social media, describing the situation and begging anyone who might know Tayli's whereabouts to come forward. Unfortunately, his plea went unanswered. The girl's foster family knew that Tayli was eagerly awaiting Halloween and had even prepared a costume, so her disappearance on the eve of the holiday seemed more than strange. Eventually, they decided to contact the police, and soon the teenager was declared missing. However, no serious search was conducted, as everyone assumed the girl would soon return after another runaway attempt. A little less than a week had passed since the foster child disappeared. Suddenly, early in the morning on November 5, 2015, a chilling call came to the police. A local fisherman who contacted the emergency services reported a horrifying discovery. He had stumbled upon a body in the yellowed reeds in the shallow waters of the Palmer River. The location where the remains were found was approximately 30 kilometers south of where Tayli was last seen alive a week earlier. During this time, the body had undergone significant decomposition, likely aided by both the local fauna and the region's specific climatic conditions. The police officers who arrived at the scene of the terrible find could not even confidently determine the sex of the deceased person, let alone establish their identity. Only after a thorough examination did they suggest that it was the body of a teenager. The condition of the remains was horrific. The body, except for underwear, had no clothing on it. The remains were immediately sent for an autopsy and forensic examination. Comparing details about missing persons in the area, the police assumed that the deceased could be 12-year-old Tayli Palmer, who had disappeared about a week earlier. Later, this assumption was confirmed by the results of a DNA analysis conducted in the laboratory, and the worst fears of law enforcement came true. During a thorough examination of the body, experts concluded that the terrible injuries, initially mistaken for animal bite marks, were most likely inflicted by a person. It became clear that the girl had become a victim of brutal violence. The case was immediately reclassified as a murder, and an investigation began. Considering the fact that Rick Thornburn was the last person who likely saw Tayli alive, investigators began the inquiry by talking to him. From the very beginning, Rick aroused suspicion with his strange behavior and inconsistencies in his statements. However, all of this had yet to be thoroughly checked and proven. It was also decided to question other members of the girl's foster family, as perhaps one of them had more information. Unfortunately, interrogations of family members yielded no useful information. Everyone, as one, confirmed the words of the head of the family that he had taken Tayli to school at 7:50 a.m., and no one had seen the missing girl since. After that, the investigators went to the school to confirm the family's testimony, and it was there that they managed to obtain more valuable information. The detectives spoke with all the 7th grade students in Tayli's class, her friends and teachers. Over 100 people were interviewed in total. It turned out that absolutely no one had seen her that day when she was going to class or even near the school. After examining the surveillance camera footage from outside and inside the school on the day of the girl's disappearance, the detectives became convinced that Tayli had not come to school and had not been spotted near the entrance, which was strange. Where then could the girl have gone? However, there were female students, Tayli's friends, who claimed that their classmate had serious problems at home. One of them said that Tayli had begged her to take her home because her foster parents were treating her badly, and she was in for big trouble with them. But the friend, due to her young age, could not make such decisions for her family and bring Tayli home, and she didn't think it was that bad. But soon after, Tayli died a terrible death. This happened literally a week before the girl's disappearance. The friend believed that these events could be related. However, Tayli did not specify to her exactly what the foster family was doing to her. After talking to other students, the police concluded that Tayli had no enemies and no one else would have harmed her. Suspicions about the foster family intensified, and investigators continued to check the Thornburns. But the foster family members categorically denied all accusations of domestic violence against them and claimed that Tayli was making everything up. As in the case of previous families from which she had run away and also complained about them, the police verified this information and found that Tayli was indeed prone to running away and was a difficult teenager. All the people close to the family, as well as neighbors, claimed that this was an exemplary family. Many took their children to their home for a private daycare, and no one believed that such decent people could have done anything to Tayli. Everyone thought she had simply run away, invented a story about being mistreated, as before, and got into some trouble and became a victim of an attack. Therefore, the police, having no grounds for suspecting the family, left them alone. This family also seemed exemplary to them, and they began to look for the reason for the murder elsewhere. Meanwhile, the foster family continued to operate the home daycare. During the investigation, detectives also interrogated about 300 registered sex offenders in the area who could have been involved in sexually motivated attacks. But this did not allow them to obtain a single lead or even the slightest hint of what might have happened to the teenager. Most of them had alibis, and some no longer even lived in the area, so no suspects were identified from this list. On December 4, 2015, shoes likely belonging to Tayli were found 100 meters from where the body was discovered, as well as her backpack that the girl used to go to school. This story became so high profile that it attracted widespread public attention. It was broadcast on many TV channels in Australia, so gradually the whole country learned about this case. On the eve of Tayli's funeral, a series of pickets took place. Outraged citizens demanded the quickest possible solution to the horrific crime and the punishment of those responsible for the girl's gruesome death, which she clearly did not deserve. The victim's birth mother, being one of the organizers of the protests, persistently sought answers from the police regarding the circumstances of her daughter's death. She appeared on television, drawing the attention of the general public to this tragedy. The woman expressed indignation at the inaction of the Child Protection Services, to whom she had entrusted her child. It was largely thanks to her efforts that over 600 people came to the farewell ceremony for Tayli, which took place on November 14. Most of them had never met the girl during her lifetime, but felt the need to pay their respects. Many of those present were dressed in white and purple t-shirts with hearts and Tayli's name, as purple was her favorite color. About 400 white roses were placed on the coffin, and when the hearse drove off to the private cremation site, purple balloons were released into the sky. 5 months later, since the day of Tayli Palmer's murder, the investigation still had no significant breakthrough. In a desperate attempt to obtain any information that would help the investigation, a reward was announced. The sum of 250,000 Australian dollars, about 160,000 dollars, was intended to be an incentive for potential witnesses. The girl's mother appeared on television again, pleading for help. She urged eyewitnesses to come forward, and even the criminals themselves to confess. In addition to the financial reward, the police guaranteed immunity from prosecution for any accomplices who, while not being the direct perpetrator of the crime, would be the first to provide valuable information. However, even such unprecedented measures did not help shed light on the circumstances of Tayli's death. Although several calls were received from concerned citizens on the hotline, none of them contained useful information. The summer of 2016 passed, and the investigation still had not identified the main suspect. Investigators worked through one version after another, questioning individuals previously convicted of sexual crimes. However, due to the significant decomposition of the body at the time of its discovery, forensic experts were unable to find clues that would allow them to accurately determine the cause of the girl's death. The only more or less reasonable assumption was the guess about strangulation, as indicated by the fracture of the hyoid bone. The most likely scenario was considered to be Tayli's abduction by a random driver near the school, as the area where parents usually drop off their children was not in the view of surveillance cameras. Anything could have happened there. However, this was just one of many theories considered by law enforcement. The reward of $250,000 Australian dollars, promised to anyone who would provide information leading to the arrest of the killer, still remained unclaimed. And then, in May 2016, after exhausting months of fruitless work, an anonymous call containing valuable information was received by the state police line. The mysterious informant reported that he had information regarding Tayli and the Thornburn foster family, where the girl had ended up. According to him, the Thornburn couple had been looking for a troubled child from the very beginning in order to receive increased payments for her care. They had no other feelings for Tayli except mercenary interest. Moreover, the anonymous informant expressed a firm conviction that each member of the foster family could be involved, to some extent, in Tayli's tragic fate. Unfortunately, he ended the conversation at this point and did not get in touch again. Attempts to establish the identity of the mysterious Good Samaritan in order to obtain additional information from him were unsuccessful. However, this call prompted investigators to return to the version of the possible guilt of the foster family in the girl's death. After all, at the very beginning of the investigation, they had received signals from students about domestic violence in the Thornburn household. However, at that time, these testimonies could not be confirmed, so this line of investigation was temporarily abandoned. Now, however, the detectives decided to take a closer look at the victim's surroundings again. Trying to verify the words of the anonymous informant, law enforcement officers re-interviewed some of Tayli's classmates. One of the girl's close friends told about her confession of an intimate relationship with the younger of the Thornburn couple's sons, 19-year-old Trent, who was considered a real handsome man. Due to her age, Tayli did not fully understand the nature of this relationship, naively considering it a manifestation of romantic feelings, as Trent assured her. The girl had even managed to fall in love with him and was delighted with the horses that the family kept on the farm. At the same time, young Tayli was terribly afraid not only of Trent, but of his entire family, which is why she sought to escape from them by any means. It was suggested that in the Thornburn home, in addition to sexual abuse, there could also be brutal physical abuse of the foster child. These testimonies from the classmate undoubtedly required thorough verification. However, numerous repeated interrogations of family members yielded no results. Everyone, as one, continued to categorically deny the slightest suspicion of wrongdoing, especially sexual harassment of a minor. Nevertheless, given the seriousness of the accusations, the local authorities decided to temporarily suspend the Thornburns' license to operate a daycare center and also revoked the family's permission to care for foster children. Law enforcement officers installed listening devices in the suspect's house. Almost every day, they managed to record shocking details that completely destroyed the image of a respectable family that the Thornburns had so carefully cultivated. In particular, it became known that on October 29, 2015, just the day before the girl's disappearance, an emergency family meeting took place. During this meeting, Trent informed his parents about the suspicious abdominal pain that Tayli was complaining about. This caused the couple great concern and even suspicion about the possible pregnancy of their 12-year-old foster daughter. As it turned out, shortly before Tayli's disappearance, the Thornburns learned about the intimate relationship between the girl and their younger son, which took place when no one was home. According to Trent himself, recorded during the wiretapping, he repeatedly had sexual intercourse with his underage foster sister. This relationship lasted about 10 months, practically the entire period during which the girl was under the family's care. Eventually, when they suspected that Tayli might be pregnant, the 19-year-old young man turned to his parents. He was terribly afraid of possible publicity, as the 7-year age difference de facto made him a criminal. However, the head of the family, Rick, reassured his son, assuring him that he would take care of solving the problem himself. Judging by the overheard conversations, the girl was terrified of her foster father. More than anything in the world, she feared the prospect of being left alone with him. Apparently, these fears were not unfounded. The rest of the family members were also openly horrified by Rick, because under the mask of a respectable family man hid an extremely cruel and dangerous personality, which was later confirmed. The evening after the aforementioned meeting brought new horrific events. Rick, having driven all the household members out of the house except for his foster daughter, was left alone with her. When, as agreed, the rest of the family members returned a couple of hours later, the girl was nowhere to be found. When asked about her disappearance, the head of the family flatly stated that Tayli had run away and the problem with her was solved once and for all. "She definitely won't tell anyone anything now," he grimly summarized. A chilling guess flashed through the minds of the relatives had the father killed the girl, if he was so sure of her silence. When one of the brothers dared to check her room, Rick strictly forbade him to do so, threateningly stopping his son. None of the Thornburns even thought of contradicting the all-powerful head of the family, so everyone simply kept silent about the incident. Thus, the falsity of Rick's story about how he allegedly took his foster daughter to school, after which she disappeared, became obvious. The fact is that in reality, he physically could not have done this. At that point, Tayli was no longer in the house, and most likely, she was already dead. However, what exactly Rick had done to her remained a mystery even to the man's closest relatives. Thanks to the wiretapping of private conversations in the house, detectives repeatedly witnessed Rick instructing everyone on what to say and how to behave so as not to arouse unnecessary suspicion from the police, and everyone obediently listened to his instructions. Law enforcement officers decided to begin interrogations with the couple's sons and their mother, rightly believing that they would be the easiest to break. And indeed, when investigators began to operate with the facts known to them, the interrogated gradually began to provide the necessary information. The longer the communication lasted, the clearer the terrifying picture of what was really happening behind the closed doors of the Thornburn home became. Everything indicated that Rick had arranged everything as if he was trying to protect his family. After carefully studying the footage from the outdoor surveillance cameras near the school, the police realized that the head of the family had gone to great lengths to disguise his crime and create a false alibi for the investigation. For example, on that fateful morning, he did drive in the direction of the school, and his car was captured by several cameras. But none of them recorded the girl getting out of the car. After these stunning revelations, the Thornburn family was hit by a barrage of accusations and public condemnation. Julie and George were accused of giving false testimony and deliberately misleading the investigation. Trent was accused of sexual violence against a minor, and Rick was charged with premeditated first-degree murder and attempts to confuse the investigation. He had intentionally mutilated the victim's body so horribly to make it impossible for forensic experts and the police to confirm her identity. And this worked to some extent because at first, even the gender of the deceased could not be established. Fortunately, despite all efforts, it was impossible to completely exclude the possibility of identifying the body. Obviously, Rick was unaware of the existence of DNA analysis. In addition, law enforcement had strong reasons to suspect Rick of years of brutal physical and sexual abuse of all the children in the family, including his own. In total, at least 9 serious charges were brought against this monster in human form, and some of them did not even directly relate to the deceased girl. Trent was accused of debauchery and giving false testimony to the investigation. The family car, which, as it turned out, was hastily sold shortly after Tayli's disappearance, was taken from the new owner for a thorough inspection. Blood traces were found on it. These stunning events could not but affect Rick's health. On the day of his arrest, while in custody in a pre-trial detention center, he lost consciousness. The man's condition was so severe that doctors had to put him into an artificial coma. However, after a few days in the hospital, Rick regained consciousness. Medics suggested that he had deliberately provoked the exacerbation by taking some medications. Fortunately, this monster in human form failed to escape responsibility for the crimes committed. Eventually, all members of the Thornburn family appeared in court one by one. The cynicism and cruelty of their actions so shook the public that people literally craved reprisals against the entire family, capable of such inhuman brutality towards a defenseless girl. The evidence provided by the prosecution was so eloquent that the arguments of the defense were practically not taken seriously by the court. Julie and Joshua pleaded guilty on all counts and agreed to testify against Trent and Rick. The jury did not have to deliberate for long. They unanimously found all family members to be real monsters, guilty of various crimes. As a result, Joshua was sentenced to 3 months in prison. His mother received 1.5 years for false testimony. Trent, who also confessed to everything, was sent to prison for 4 years for incest, perjury, and obstruction of justice. Currently, the mother and sons are already at large. Trent, who repeatedly Tayli, was released from prison on January 19, 2018, having spent only 16 months there. The main sadist of this story, Rick, received the most severe punishment. During the trial, he confessed to the murder of Tayli, which he brutally committed in the barn, and the subsequent concealment of the girl's body in the river to save the reputation of his son and the entire family. In addition, the man was found guilty of a number of other serious crimes. In May 2018, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment with the right to parole no earlier than 20 years. The shocking details of this case caused not only a wave of public outrage and close media attention. The Australian legal system undertook a thorough revision of the legislation governing the principles of protecting children transferred to the care of foster families. As a result, a number of improvements were introduced aimed at strengthening control, especially in terms of identifying potential criminal elements among candidates for guardianship or persons who already had problems with the law. In addition, several new norms appeared concerning the care of minors with deviant behavior, as well as requirements for married couples applying for the adoption of such children. If you like my presentation of this chilling story, please subscribe to the channel, like it, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you all for your attention. See you next time.